Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the final Coil of Bahamut Turn 1, also known as Turn 10. In this turn, we face the electric Imdugood, a feisty kitty with a negative personality. You can expect a lot of resistance from this boss, so before you charge into battle, this guide, full of ample tips, will keep your static group grounded in the facts. My name is Mizz and I crack myself up. The fight is composed of 5 phases, with each phase building up on the mechanics of the previous phase. You'll notice that upon engaging, the outer ring of the platform fills up with electricity. This acts as a softened rage for the fight and gives you a little over 10 minutes before the entire platform is engulfed in lightning, dealing a little over 1k damage per tick. Anytime someone dies to a boss mechanic, the boss will be buffed with electric charge. This will increase the amount of damage his abilities, especially electric burst, does later on. The better your groups play, the easier time you'll have throughout the encounter. While positioning of the boss is highly dependent on your group's personal preference, we chose to tank him facing north within the innermost circle. This positioning is maintained throughout the fight and forces the center of the platform to be the area of dealing with stuff. The raid will spread out around the outer sides of the platform, only going into the center to deal with specific mechanics. The boss has a massive frontal cone called Crackle Hiss, and at no time should the boss be facing the raid. He also has a long tail whip called Spike Flail that can be triggered on cooldown, similar to the tail whips of other bosses. The main tank and healers need to be on the lookout for Critical Rip. This is a massive hit similar to Raven's Beak, but without the secondary debuff and explosion. Use cooldowns and shields to survive it. Healers need to keep an eye open for prey. A random player will be targeted by this red circle and affected by a 7-second debuff that will do a bit of damage after its duration. Should the affected player take this initial hit, they will be afflicted with Erratic Blaster. This debuff will eventually explode for massive damage. Apply a 20-second paralyze on the player and add an electric charge to the boss. To avoid Erratic Blaster completely, your healers need to shield the initial prey damage with Adlo or Stone Skin. In the non-ad phases, prey will occur on a set pattern. During ad phases, you'll have to deal with 2 prey targets, but we'll get to that soon. The main mechanic comes in dealing with Wild Charge. Imdugood will mark up a random target with this purple mark. After 5 seconds, the player is stunned in place while the boss turns to them and charges at them, brutally trampling everything in its path, unless you handle it correctly. The way Wild Charge works is simple. There needs to be at least 3 people in front of the charged target or they will die. The first person to be hit will also suffer the most damage, so naturally, the off-tank with a cooldown will be taking that first hit, with the others stacking between him and the charged target. Anytime the boss casts Wild Charge, he will also place a puddle of electric poo on the ground that all players should avoid. It's difficult to see on the platform, but if you notice this debuff, you need to GTFO. Immediately after Wild Charge, the boss will flip back to the main tank and cast Crackle Hiss. Since the raid has returned to their loose positions around the outer sides, nobody should be getting hit by it or the following Spike Flail. This phase will repeat until 85%, at which point Imdugood will cast Electro Charge and summon 2 sets of ads composed of 2 sons and 2 daughters. The boss himself will go immune while the ads are up and begin to stack electric charges on himself. The higher this buff gets, the higher the damage at the end of the ad phase, when he casts a room-wide AoE blast called Electric Burst. Your group probably won't be able to survive anything over 14 stacks, so high raid damage is vital in this phase, especially if you've screwed up in the previous phase and the boss has a head start on his stacks. To meet the overall enrage timer, it is recommended to kill the ads with no more than 7 stacks. These ads share similar abilities to Imdugood and should be positioned appropriately. Tanking 2 daughters or 2 sons together will buff them, so tanks need to keep their ads away from the other set. We chose to position the ads with one set facing northish, the other facing southish on opposite sides around the inner ring, and the raid group stacking in the middle on the boss's butt. This allows each of the wide cones to avoid the raid and the other tank completely, like so. The daughters will cast prey on random targets. 2 daughters means 2 preys in the same amount of time that you previously had to deal with only 1. Your healers will have to work together to shield both targets, or one scholar can beast through it alone with Swiftcast and buff shields. Either way it's done, be sure that Paralyze doesn't go off, as damage is very important in this phase. The sons will throw down the electric poo when they die, so be careful not to stand in it. In this phase, our group prefers to kill 1 set of ads before burning down the second set. Once all ads are down, the boss will continue to charge up for another 20 seconds before casting Electric Burst. The damage of this will highly depend on how many stacks of electric charge he's acquired. After Burst, the entire raid needs to spread to their positions as Phase 3 begins with a new mechanic, Heat Lightning. Heat Lightning will target 3 random players and place a 7-second vulnerability debuff on them. This debuff will splash onto any nearby players, so it is essential that all players are sufficiently far enough away from others anytime Heat Lightning is being cast. In this phase, every other Heat Lightning will cast in conjunction with Wild Charge. This means that anyone affected by Heat Lightning can no longer use their bodies to soak damage. For every Wild Charge and Heat Lightning combo, only players without vulnerability have to stack to soak the charge damage. The only player guaranteed to not get Heat Lightning is the person with the highest enmity. As such, our tanks prefer to tank swap every Heat Lightning and charge combo, regardless of whether or not the off-tank gets vulnerability. We find that this cuts out the reactionary element and ensures that a debuffless tank is guaranteed to be available to soak Wild Charge no matter what. Be careful not to taunt before the boss begins to cast Wild Charge. If your off-tank happens to have the vulnerability debuff and taunts before, a single white hit from the boss will be enough to one-shot them. Any other player that is not affected by Heat Lightning at this point needs to immediately stack in for Wild Charge. Remember to handle praise, and the rest of the phase will repeat until 55%, at which point I'mDoGood will cast Electric Charge again and take us into the second add phase. The adds will spawn in the same way that they did in the first add phase. However, about 20 seconds into this phase, another Son and Daughter will spawn at the north and south points of the inner circle. Using Mage Limit Break 3 here will allow us to easily kill at least one add in each set, allowing the tanks to pick up the new adds without worrying about them getting buffed. Our group chooses to kill the Daughter in one group and then the Son in the other group so that the tanks can pick up their respective adds as soon as they spawn. Kill the adds in whatever order you deem fit. Remember to shield through the praise and watch out for the death poop from the Sons. You are under the same constraints to push through the phase as before, so Big Dipus is recommended. The boss will cast Electric Burst 20 seconds after the last add dies, and the healers need to heal through the AoE blast before spreading back to their positions. The last phase introduces a new mechanic, Cyclonic Chaos, or much easily referred to as Tether. This will target a random player and after about 6 seconds will cause an explosion that does high damage, knocks back, and places a vulnerability debuff on anyone it hits. 2 other players must stack in with the tether target to soak the damage or they will die. In our group, we assign 2 players that will always soak tethers. These players are also assigned individual backups in case either one of them can't soak. The tether target will always take his tether directly behind the boss, far enough away from our Wild Charge marker but not close enough to stand in any potential Wild Charge poop. The general principle of this phase is still the same. Players without vulnerability will be soaking damage from each mechanic cluster, while players with the vulnerability will stay away. All the mechanics can happen in one of 3 possible combinations. The first and easiest is Heat Lightning and Tether. The tethered player will run to the center of the room while Heat Lightning goes off. Any player that is not affected by Heat Lightning will quickly run in to soak the Tether blast. The second possible combination is Wild Charge and Heat Lightning. This is similar to what happens in Phase 3 and also the only mechanic combination in this last phase where we tank swap. The last combination is Tether and Wild Charge. This one can be a bit tricky if you overthink it, but it's quite simple once you break down each step. The Tether will run behind the boss and his buddies will come in to soak the Tether blast. Moments later, a target will be marked for Wild Charge and they will run to the assigned spot and hang out until it's done. The Tether Blast will happen moments before I'mDoGood will begin to cast Wild Charge. As soon as the Tether Blast goes off, the off-tank and anyone without vulnerability will run in to soak the Wild Charge. Easy peasy. The only time this combination can be difficult is if one or both of your assigned soakers cannot take the Tether Blast, whether it be due to vulnerability, being tethered, or being marked as the charge. They need to immediately communicate to their backups that they need to soak the tether instead. There is no set order for these combinations, however you can count on the fact that 2 of the same combinations will never happen back to back. All players should be on the lookout to see what's coming out first and react appropriately. In between these combinations, you are still dealing with Critical Rip, Prey, the Tail Whip, and the Frontal Cone. The last thing to note in this phase is something you may not even notice if all goes well. Should a player die in this phase, the boss will gain a stack of Electric Charge and cast Electric Burst moments later. Electric Burst will place a lightning debuff on all players in this phase, and it's highly recommended that you do not let this happen. This phase will repeat until the boss is down or the room is engulfed in electricity and you eventually die. Shocking, I know. And there you have it, your first final coil kill. I'm so excited I can feel the electricity in the air. Okay, I promise I will stop. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll head into turn 11. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.